Imagine this. You're a successful black CEO, sitting in your first-class seat 2A, finally taking a moment to breathe after years of hard work. Then, suddenly, a flight attendant leans in and says, "I'm sorry, ma'am, but you'll need to move. A VIP passenger has requested this seat." You look up, and the VIP they're talking about is a younger white woman. Everyone's watching, cameras out, your dignity hanging in the air. What would you do? Would you stand up and walk away quietly just to avoid making a scene, or would you stay seated, knowing that doing so might cost you your peace, your comfort, even your reputation? Because in that moment, it's not just about a seat. It's about every time someone was told they don't belong. It's about every silent battle fought in boardrooms, airports, classrooms, everywhere people are judged before they even speak. And 5 minutes later, when the entire flight crew is fired, the world will finally ask who really deserved that seat. If this were you, what choice would you make? Would you still stand up, or would you finally stay seated? This is not just a story about race. It's a story about dignity, courage, and the quiet kind of strength that changes everything. Stay with me, because what happens next might just change the way you see justice forever. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you believe in stories that speak truth, even when the world tries not to listen. The warm yellow light shone down on the Skylux Airlines first-class cabin, reflecting off every pure white leather seat surface, every small table, every bottled water that was shiny as if it had just been carefully wiped. The space was quiet, except for the clacking of suitcases on the floor, and the soft background music playing from the small speakers. Selena Harper, the young CEO of Right Tech Solutions, in black, sat upright in seat 2A, looking out the plane window. She took a deep breath, feeling the cabin air, rewarding herself with a few minutes of quiet before the long flight from Los Angeles to New York. Selena set her laptop on the table in front of her, opened her briefcase, and checked the schedule for the upcoming tech conference. Everything she had been planned weeks in advance, from her slides to her script for the important client meeting. Seat 2A was more than just a place to sit. It was a strategic work location, a place where she could write, read, and think without interruption, and she had booked it, paid in advance, and verified her platinum card all good. But Selena's eyes caught another figure entering first class, and she realized that the quiet preparation this morning would not last. Emily Lawson, a white woman, neatly dressed, her expensive watch gleaming in the cabin lights, stopped right in front of seat 2A. Emily's gaze was more than just looking at her. It was a statement of power, privilege, and the belief that she had always deserved to sit there. "Excuse me," Emily said, her tone both polite and sharp. "That seat, it's mine. I sit here on every flight, always." Selena raised her head, met Emily's eyes, and didn't respond right away. She felt a wave of tension spread through the cabin. Some passengers turned to look. Phones began to be furtively pulled out. Looks were half sympathetic, half curious. She realized this wasn't just seat 2A. It was a test of her dignity, her equality, her intelligence. Just then, Laura Miller, the head flight attendant, stepped forward, her face trying to smile slightly, but her eyes betraying the tension. "Ma'am, it seems there's been a mix-up. We need you to move so we can accommodate one of our regular platinum guests," Laura said, her tone both polite and trying to keep the pressure down. Selena took a deep breath, her hand gripping the platinum card on the table, lifting it up so Laura could see it clearly. "I am a Skylux Platinum member," she said, her voice calm and unafraid. "This seat is assigned to me. I reserved it weeks ago. I will not move." The atmosphere in the cabin seemed to freeze for a few seconds. Emily curled her lips, clearly dissatisfied but not in a hurry. Derek Johnson, the first-class supervisor, stood behind her, his eyes sharp but revealing a look of embarrassment. For the first time, power did not belong only to the familiar VIP guests. Selena felt every movement around her, the passengers' eyes. The phones pulled out, the judgmental and sympathetic glances. She knew this moment would decide something bigger than herself. She thought of all the rejections she had had to endure, all the times she had had to prove herself in a biased environment. But for now, she kept her composure, controlled her breathing, and didn't let any of her anger show. Emily, not given up, nodded at Laura and lowered her voice. "I hope this won't delay the flight over such a trivial matter." But Selena understood clearly. This was no longer about the seat. It was a test of her own worth. Selena looked around, seeing the eyes recording her every move. She knew that her power now lay not in her platinum card or her valid ticket, but in the way she maintained her composure and dignity. Her inner struggle was, should I get angry and respond directly, or should I stay calm and demonstrate my rightness and true power? She chose to stay calm. She raised her head, looking straight at Laura and Derek. "I paid for this seat. I followed all procedures. I am here for work, and I will not give up my rightful place. Please respect that." The words rang out softly but firmly. Some passengers whispered to each other, their eyes filled with admiration. Others remained silent, their phones still recording. The atmosphere was both hushed and tense, framed by the soft lighting of the cabin, making first class the stage for a larger story about power, privilege, and the silent struggles of those who had been excluded. The mini-climax of Part 1 is the moment Selena holds the 2A seat while facing obvious pressure from privileged power, opening up the next story development where she will discover her true strength and the power hidden under the papers, shares, and strategic contracts. Selena Harper remained seated, her back straight, her gaze fixed on the window. Everything around her seemed to slow down. The sound of the suitcase wheels on the floor, the rustling of magazines, the soft music from the subwoofer all faded away under the pressure that was pressing down on seat 2A. Emily Lawson stood right next to her, leaning slightly towards Selena, her voice soft and sharp. "She always sat here. I've sat here many times. This is my seat, no question." Laura Miller took a deep breath and forced a smile. "Ma'am, it seems there has been a mistake. We would like you to give up your seat to another platinum frequent flyer." Her voice was gentle, but she tried to maintain the pressure. Derek Johnson stood behind her, his hands behind his back, his face tense, his eyes showing confusion. He knew he was in a situation where power was no longer in his hands. Selena felt the pressure on her shoulders. She knew that if she gave up her seat now, she would not only be giving up a seat, but also her dignity and self-worth. She looked down at the table, clutching her platinum card tightly, lifting it up so Laura could see clearly. "I am a Skylux Platinum member. This seat was reserved for me 2 weeks ago. I cannot give it up." Selena's voice was calm but firm. Emily pursed her lips and frowned, not in a hurry to retreat. Derek shook his head slightly. Laura sighed but still did not dare to resist the VIP guests. The eyes of the surrounding passengers began to follow. Some took out their phones. The screen light flashed on the white seats. Selena knew they were recording every detail. She closed her eyes for a moment, wondering how many times had she been rejected, doubted because of her skin color or her background. She'd felt excluded, had to prove herself in an environment filled with powerful people and silent prejudices. Now, she was in a position where all eyes were on her, and she had to choose how to react. Selena opened her eyes and looked straight at Derek and Laura. "I paid for this seat. I followed all the procedures. I am here for work, and I will not give up my seat. Please respect that." Her words rang out, soft but enough to silence everyone. A few passengers whispered to each other, their eyes filled with admiration. Emily walked lightly towards Selena, the cold smile still on her lips. "I hope the flight won't be delayed because of this," she said without shouting. Just a normal voice was enough to make the pressure fill the cabin. Selena took in every detail the passengers' eyes. The phone pulled out, Laura's hand shaking slightly as she tried to set her glass of water on the table. The air felt thick, heavy, and tense. She knew this moment would have a profound impact, not just on her, but on everyone who had ever been dismissed because of bias or prejudice. Selena struggled internally. Should she react violently, pointing out Emily and the flight attendant's mistakes, or stay calm and demonstrate the true power of composure and authority? She knew that an angry reaction would only win Emily over in the eyes of the onlookers. She chose to stay calm, holding the platinum card firmly on the table, raising it a little higher to ensure everyone could see it. Laura and Derek looked at each other, realizing that the power was no longer in Emily's or theirs. A small part of their minds began to question the principles and rules they had once blindly followed. They both felt a subtle but powerful shift in the air. Selena sat still, her eyes never leaving Emily. She felt a small but certain strength spread from within. She knew she could use this moment to create change, not through anger or revenge, but through demonstrating truth and true power, power built on knowledge, preparation, and courage. Emily glanced around at the passengers, a feeling of unease passing through her. A few people looked straight at her, their eyes no longer criticizing but instead filled with sympathy for Selena. This was the moment when everyone realized that true power did not come from fame or money, but from integrity and standing up for one's own values. Selena felt her heart rate slow, took a deep breath, and felt calm and in control. This wasn't just a fight for seat 2A. It was a fight for her own worth, for everyone who had ever been dismissed because of their skin color, gender, or background. The warm yellow light of the cabin reflected off her face, creating a quiet, tense atmosphere. A few passengers began filming, their eyes lighting up, sensing that this story would transcend first class. Selena knew she had created a moment that would change not only the flight, but perhaps the way Skylux Airlines and those around her viewed fairness and privilege. Selena's inner turmoil intensified. She felt angry, and part of her wanted to criticize Emily and Derek, but she reminded herself that staying calm was true strength. She was standing between power and justice, and the choice she made would determine everything that would happen next. The cabin was still quiet, but every glance, every small gesture, every phone call became a witness to the moment Selena held on to seat 2A. It was a test of privilege, prejudice, and her own inner strength. Selena's eyes followed Emily, scanning the passengers and flight attendants. She knew that in this moment, calm and courage would be more powerful than any act of anger. She gripped her platinum card, took a deep breath, and prepared for the next steps in the struggle that 2A was only the beginning. Selena Harper remained seated in seat 2A, her gaze calm but a wave of emotion rising inside. She watched Emily Lawson standing next to her, her cold eyes still insisting that this seat was hers. But Selena had seen her true power, a power that no expensive watch or bribe could cover up. Selena opened her laptop, her hands shaking slightly with nervousness, but her eyes focused. She recalled the recent shareholder meeting where she had taken a strategic stake in Skylux Airlines. Half of her mind was still focused on the calm she needed to maintain. The other half was realizing that this moment was an opportunity to turn potential power into actual power. Emily lifted her chin, her voice sharp. "I don't think you understand how this works. In first class, certain seats are reserved for long-standing guests." She stepped closer, her hand lightly touching the seat, as if to occupy the space in front of Selena. Derek and Laura stood beside her, the two of them looking at each other, not knowing what to do next. Selena took a deep breath, quietly took her phone from her pocket. She turned on the camera, the screen light flashing on her face, her hands placed firmly on the table, recording every detail. Laura trembled slightly. Derek was silent. Emily didn't realize that her every move was being recorded. Selena's inner battle began. How many times had she been dismissed, doubted because of her skin color or background? How many times had she had to prove herself to those more powerful than her? Now, she could turn this 2A moment into proof that true power doesn't come from privilege or money. Selena looked around the cabin, seeing the passengers' eyes starting to sneak glances. Some pulled out their phones, the screens flashing. They were recording every gesture, every word. Selena smiled slightly inwardly, knowing that this moment would not just last in the cabin, it would spread, creating pressure for those who always thought power was everything. Emily pursed her lips, trying to maintain her authoritative demeanor, but her eyes were slightly worried. She had never seen anyone hold their chair as firmly and confidently as Selena. Derek frowned, looking at Laura, both realizing that they had lost control of the situation. Selena spoke, her voice calm but authoritative. "I have every right to this seat. I booked it, I paid for it, and I am a platinum member. No one, not even you, Emily, can change that." The words were not loud, but they were enough to silence everyone. A few passengers whispered softly, their eyes filled with admiration and sympathy. She continued, her eyes never leaving Emily, her phone still recording. "This isn't just about a seat. This is about respect and fairness. I won't move because someone thinks they deserve it more." These words weren't just a statement, they were a testament to inner strength and integrity. Emily took a step back, frowning, her face showing irritation but also a little unease. Derek and Laura remained still, the sense of traditional power they once held evaporating. Selena felt the cabin energy shift, a meaningful silence falling. Selena stared at her phone, still debating whether to use her power stake immediately or to remain calm, allowing the situation to unfold naturally. She knew that acting in anger would give Emily the upper hand in the eyes of the passengers. She decided to slow down, stay calm, and let the real power emerge, the power of preparation, knowledge, and self-belief. A young passenger sitting behind Selena was secretly turning on her phone, her eyes filled with amazement. She whispered to the person next to her, "This is unbelievable. She's standing up for herself, and she is not backing down." The sighs and amazement from the passengers created an atmosphere that was both tense and sympathetic. Selena took a deep breath, lifted the phone higher, and looked straight into the camera. She told herself, "I can change everything from this moment." Not with anger, but with calmness, dignity, and my true power. Emily lowered her voice, her movements trembling slightly. For the first time, she realized that wealth and privilege were not enough to gain real power. Derek and Laura fell silent, feeling their faith in the old system was crumbling. Selena gently placed her hands on the table, still looking straight at Emily, and emphasized once more, "I am here for work. I have every right to this seat. Nothing will make me leave." Every eye in the cabin turned to her. A few passengers began secretly filming, their eyes filled with surprise, sympathy, and admiration. Selena's sense of calm and control permeated the cabin. She knew that this moment was the beginning of a larger chain of events, one where she would not only hold seat 2A, but also turn her hidden power into actual power. Every gesture, every glance was capturing the subtle but meaningful confrontation between fairness and privilege. The flight hadn't taken off yet. The first-class cabin was silent, save for the steady hum of the air conditioning. Selena Harper sat still, staring out the window, but her mind was already far away from the cabin. She knew this moment, with all eyes on her, could be the beginning of something bigger. Behind her, a young passenger, Samantha Brooks, leaned in, trying to keep her phone low as she filmed the scene before her. She didn't know why she did it. She just felt it was the right thing to do. The moment had an unusual energy. She wanted others to see this truth. Selena heard whispers behind her, but she remained calm. Emily Lawson stood beside her, her eyes filled with irritation, the polite smile on her lips gone. Derek Johnson approached and whispered to Selena, "Ma'am, please understand. We're only trying to avoid a scene. If you just move to another seat, we can take off sooner." Selena turned to look at him, her voice soft but firm. "A scene. Derek, this is already a scene. The only thing you can avoid is doing the wrong thing twice." The words made Derek freeze. He stepped back, meeting Laura Miller's eyes, and they both knew the situation was getting out of control. Samantha finished filming the first segment. She sent the video to her friend, along with a short message. "You need to see this." Within minutes, the video began to be shared in small groups and then spread rapidly outside. Meanwhile, Selena opened her phone, scrolled through her emails, and saw a letter from her company's legal department. She realized that this story wouldn't end on the flight. She knew the power of the internet, and if something went viral, Skylux Airlines would face real consequences. Emily was starting to lose patience. She pressed the call button, her voice sharp. "Are you really letting this happen? I've been flying with Skylux for 10 years. This is not acceptable." Laura stepped forward, her eyes filled with fear. She didn't know what else to do but smile. "I understand, Miss Lawson. Please just give us a moment." But time was not on their side. A passenger in the back seat whispered to his friend, "That woman is being mistreated. You can see it." Another whispered, "I'm recording too." Selena took a deep breath, checking her watch. It had only been a few minutes, but to her it felt like hours. Little did she know that outside the cabin, the world was starting to take notice. Samantha's video went viral on TikTok, then Twitter, then Facebook. In less than 10 minutes, thousands of views poured in. Comments began pouring in, a mix of outrage and support. Unbelievable. Still happening in 2025, she's calm, powerful, and right. Respect. Skylux better have a good lawyer on the plane. Selena felt the gazes change. A few passengers began to take her side, though no one said so. She understood that modern justice didn't come from the courtroom, it came from the camera, from the truth scene. Derek looked at his tablet screen, where the internal notification was displayed. He knew the video had gone viral. His expression changed dramatically. Laura bowed her head, her hands shaking as she refilled her glass of water. They both realized this was far beyond a polite smile situation. Emily still hadn't realized it. She pulled out her phone and sent a few texts to someone, muttering, "They'll fix this. They always do." Selena saw that, feeling both pity and determination. She didn't hate Emily. She was just tired of the cycle of power and privilege that Emily represented. She leaned over and whispered to Laura, "Laura, I hope you know this isn't about anger. It's about dignity. Please remember that." Selena's voice was soft, but it made Laura choke. Something in her eyes woke. Some part of her wanted to believe Selena was right. The announcement came over the loudspeaker, and Captain James Reynolds made a few brief statements about the flight delay. Selena closed her eyes, listening to the monotonous voice, but feeling the cold indifference in each word. She opened her eyes and looked straight ahead, the light from the window illuminating her face, creating a calm and determined beauty. She knew things were just beginning. She remembered the recent shareholders' meeting, where she'd signed a $50 million technology contract with Skylux. She had real power, and she would use it, but not with anger, but with strategy. At that moment, Selena's phone vibrated. A message from her assistant appeared on the screen. "Video is trending. You're at 2 million views already." She smiled softly, breathing slowly. The power of the internet had done its first part. Now it was time to choose her next step. Emily still didn't understand what was going on. She turned to Laura and asked softly, "Why is everyone staring at me?" Laura bowed her head, not answering. Inside, she knew she had just witnessed an irreversible change. Selena put her phone back on the table and turned off the camera. She didn't need to film anymore. Everything that needed to be recorded had been recorded, and justice had begun to move, not with screams, but with silence and evidence. The first-class cabin was filled with a heavy silence. Shame and tension spread between people who thought they had control. Selena sat still, saying nothing more. She knew that in a few more hours, the outside world would do the rest. As the plane made its emergency landing at the Denver transit hub, no one spoke. The air in first class was colder than the wind outside. Selena Harper stood up, adjusted her jacket, grabbed her bag, and walked off the plane without looking back. The white light of the airport corridor shone directly on her face, calm, quiet. But behind her was a rising storm. The phone in her pocket buzzed, messages from her legal team, from the media, from her assistant. All of them said the same thing: the video had surpassed 10 million views. Hashtags like Skylux Scandal, Use Seat 2A, Your Justice for Selena were dominating social media. Selena paused in the hallway, took a deep breath, and dialed someone. Her voice was low and clear. "I want the emergency shareholders meeting this afternoon. No, it can't wait until tomorrow morning. I want everyone there." On the other end of the line was the voice of Richard Wallace, CEO of Skylux Airlines. Calm, but a little shaken. He asked again, "Selena, I understand you're angry, but this could be a misunderstanding. We will investigate." Selena responded with a smile that no one saw. "Richard, I'm not angry. I just can't accept the silence. I'm your strategic shareholder. I own 25% of the shares. I have the right to demand this, and I will. If Skylux doesn't act now, I will." Richard was silent for a few seconds. His voice lowered. "Are you threatening me, Selena?" She looked straight into the mirror that reflected her face and said softly as a breath, "No. Richard, I am reminding you of your responsibility." She hung up and looked up, feeling the adrenaline rush. This wasn't just between her and Emily, or a few errant employees. This was a fight against the entire system. Meanwhile, in Skylux's New York office, Richard Wallace was in an emergency executive meeting. The PR, legal, and operations directors were pale. The giant projection screen displayed millions of comments pouring in every minute. "Selena Harper. Is that Selena Harper from Right Tech Solutions?" the PR director asked, his voice cracking. "Yes," Richard replied, "and she's the one who just signed a $50 million technology contract for our dispatch system." The atmosphere in the meeting room was heavy. Another director whispered, "If she withdraws the contract, Skylux will lose everything within a month." Richard stood up, sighed, and looked out the window at the city. He understood that this was no ordinary media crisis. This was a precise strategic strike, executed by someone who knew the rules of the game better than anyone else. Meanwhile, Selena was sitting in the airport VIP lounge. She put her laptop on the table and opened the email file she had prepared. The subject line had only a few words: "Ultimate Letter." The content is written concisely, clearly, and leaves no room for negotiation. If Skylux does not conduct an internal investigation and fire the individuals responsible, Laura Miller, Derek Johnson, and James Reynolds within 24 hours, I will withdraw all of my shares and cancel the $50 million technology contract. I will also release internal documents that show Skylux knew about the customer bias and failed to correct it for the past 2 years. I believe in fairness, but I also believe that justice must be strong." She pressed send. A second later, the email was sent to Richard Wallace and the entire Skylux Airlines board of directors. Selena closed the phone, leaned back in her chair, and closed her eyes. She didn't feel triumphant. She just felt tired. Memories flooded back the first time she was rejected for a job because they were looking for someone who fit the company's image better. The time she had to overcome invisible prejudices to gain respect. And now, she was no longer that young girl. The phone rang. It was her lawyer. "Selena, I just saw the video. You did the right thing, but be careful. They will try to twist things." She smiled slightly. "I know, but I'm ready. I don't want revenge. I just want them to learn responsibility." Outside the waiting room, passers-by began to recognize her. A few came up to shake her hand or whisper, "We saw the video. You did the right thing." She just nodded in thanks. In their eyes, she saw trust and hope. That night, on American television, news channels aired the Skylux incident. Video footage from passengers was shown over and over again. The image of Selena keeping her composure in the midst of a power storm was hailed as a symbol of dignity and composure. On social media, celebrities, activists, and even other CEOs reshared the video with the hashtag Respect in the Sky. In the Skylux office, Richard Wallace received hundreds of calls from shareholders, partners, and the media. He looked back at Selena's email ultimatum, then stood up and said firmly, "Call an emergency meeting. Now, we have no choice." As the meeting began, Selena was shown on the big screen, broadcasting live via video call. The light from behind her made her face look calm and confident. She spoke slowly, each word clearly. "Richard, I don't want to drag anyone down. I just want justice to be served. I don't care about a public apology. I want to change the way you treat people." Her voice was not loud, not threatening, but it contained the strength of someone who had suffered, who had fought, and had nothing left to lose. Richard was silent for a few seconds, then replied, "Selena, you will have it. We will handle it. I promise." Selena smiled slightly. Good, because otherwise there would be no more room in the sky for Skylux. She disconnected. The screen went black, leaving only the light reflecting off Richard's face. The conference room fell silent. Outside, it was late. Selena looked out the window, watching the planes take off, the small lights fading into the distance. She felt both calm and determined. She wasn't just defending her rights. She was paving the way for true justice. The New York morning began with a thin layer of fog covering the Skylux Airlines headquarters building. The tall glass doors opened, and reporters crowded outside. The company's sign reflected the flashing lights of dozens of cameras. The story of the flight was still the hottest topic on every morning newscast. The atmosphere in the 40th floor conference room was thick. Richard Wallace stood at the head of the table, holding a cup of coffee he hadn't drunk yet. Every board member was present, his eyes tired and tense. On the large screen at the head of the room was Selena Harper, connected by video call. Her face, framed by soft light, exuded calm, confidence, and unafraid. Richard spoke, trying to keep his composure. "Selena, thank you for coming. I believe we all want the best for Skylux. But you must understand that the decision to immediately lay off 3 employees will affect the union and the system of operations." Selena didn't speak right away. She looked straight at the screen, her voice low and clear. "Richard, the real impact is your silence in the face of wrongdoing. An airline cannot soar when its wings are broken by bias and privilege." The conference room was silent. No one moved. One HR manager adjusted his glasses. Another sighed. Selena continued, still calm, but her voice held weight. "I've spent years working with Skylux. I believe in your values, in your culture of respect. But the video shows something else. It's not just a few people's mistakes. It's a flaw in your culture." Richard was silent. Next to him, the legal director leaned in and whispered, "If we don't act, the stock will drop this morning." Selena seemed to have guessed. She leaned over, opened her laptop, and shared her screen. A dashboard appeared, a chart of Skylux stocks plummeting. The market doesn't respond to scandal. The market responds to silence, she said. A few of the council members began to nod. Her calm composure made them listen. She didn't shout, didn't threaten, just spoke with facts and truth. Selena looked straight at Richard. "You have 2 choices. One is to stay silent and let this brand fall apart. 2 is to do the right thing. Now." Richard put his coffee cup down on the table. He looked around at each member, who supports opening an investigation and suspending the 3 employees involved. One hand went up, then 2, then 3, almost the entire council. Richard nodded slightly. Okay, we'll do the right thing. Selena kept her eyes steady. I appreciate the decision, but this is just the beginning. I want a public statement in which Skylux commits to overhauling its entire training, bias testing, and customer rights system. No more unwritten rules for the rich, and I want it done within 48 hours. Richard sighed. You know this is going to cost millions. Selena chuckled. Compared to the trust of millions of customers, that number is nothing. Justice is not cheap, Richard, but it is always worth it. There was a moment of silence, then a soft clap, not from the council, but from the media advisors in the corner. The mood changed. Richard's voice dropped, but this time it carried acceptance. Okay, I'll sign this resolution today. Selena nodded, a small smile flickering across her face. Thank you. I believe Skylux can fly higher, but only if you look straight down to see what's fallen. She disconnected. The screen went dark. In the conference room, Richard stood still, staring at the black screen, his eyes heavy. She just gave us a lesson in management, he said quietly. Outside, the online world continued to seethe. News spread quickly that Skylux would launch a full internal investigation, suspend 3 employees involved, and pledge to overhaul its culture. Public opinion exploded. Experts hailed the move as a bold one, while many called Selena the calm storm. That afternoon, in her Los Angeles office, Selena watched the television screen, listening to the news report of the shareholders' meeting. The announcer's voice rang out. Skylux Airlines has announced the temporary layoffs of the employees involved in the incident on Flight 272 and a commitment to comprehensive restructuring. This decision comes just 24 hours after Right Tech Solutions CEO Selena Harper sent an ultimatum demanding action. She turned off the TV and leaned back in her chair. There was no cheering, no sense of victory, just silence and a deep weariness. She knew what mattered wasn't who won, but what would change afterward. Her phone vibrated. It was a message from Richard. Thank you. I hope this is a new beginning, not just for Skylux, but for us. Selena looked at the message and smiled slightly. She typed back, let your actions speak for themselves. Outside the window, the sunset fell, reflecting off the glass buildings. Selena looked out at the city, feeling the breeze. She knew a new chapter had begun, not just for the company, but for herself, and that, in a way, made it all worth it. 3 days after the emergency shareholders' meeting, Skylux Airlines held its official press conference. The bright afternoon light poured through the large glass panels of the conference hall. The Skylux logo was placed in the middle of a pure white background, with a long line of reporters in front of it. The atmosphere in the room was tense. Richard Wallace stepped onto the podium. His suit was dark, and his face bore the marks of many sleepless nights. His voice was low and slow, echoing in the silence. Today, Skylux Airlines officially confirmed the termination of 3 employees, Laura Miller, Derek Johnson, and James Reynolds, for serious violations of customer service standards. The airline will also conduct a retraining program for the entire team, along with a policy of transparency and passenger feedback. We sincerely apologize to Ms. Selena Harper and all those who trust Skylux. The sound of cameras clicking continuously rang out. The reporters started to pour in questions. Do you think this is just a move to appease the media? Is Skylux really changing? Or is it just afraid of losing the investment shares from Right Tech Solutions? Richard did not shy away. He replied frankly, "This is not a decision to protect the image. This is a decision to save the soul of a brand." That statement immediately became a big headline in the media that afternoon. Meanwhile, in the Right Tech Solutions office in Los Angeles, Selena Harper sat by the window, a steaming cup of coffee in her hand. The TV screen in front of her showed the entire press conference. When she heard Richard say those words, she just closed her eyes slightly, not complacently, not gloating, just a feeling of closure. She thought of Laura, Derek, and James. Those three people had been products of a biased system. Maybe they weren't bad people. They just hadn't been taught to be fair. She wasn't happy they'd lost their jobs, but she believed that sometimes falling was the only way to wake up. The door to the room opened. Her assistant, Ava Collins, walked in. "Selena, the video of the press conference is going viral again. People are calling you the modern icon of equality." Selena smiled, her voice soft. "Equality doesn't need an icon. Ava, it just needs to be practiced." Ava nodded, then hesitated. "There's one more thing." Emily Lawson emailed an apology. "Would you like to see it?" Selena was silent for a few seconds, her eyes staring out the window at the tall buildings reflecting the afternoon sun. She said softly, "No need. Some apologies only have meaning when people change. I hope she does." That evening, Selena drove alone to Santa Monica Beach. The sea was calm, the breeze carried a hint of salt. She took off her shoes and walked barefoot on the sand, feeling the cold grains between her toes, a rare quiet after the stormy days. She opened her phone and read the message from Richard again. "We have started internal reform. Skylux will sponsor scholarships for students of color who want to work in the aviation industry. Thank you for making us look at ourselves." Selena smiled slightly. Some changes don't need to be loud. They just need to start with one person saying no. The next day, videos of Skylux employees attending their first training session went viral on social media. Viewers saw real change. It was no longer just slogans, it was action. One user commented, "She didn't just hold seat 2A. She held dignity for millions of people who were once cast aside." Selena read the comment in silence. Her eyes welled up. Each individual story seemed to piece together into a larger mirror, a reflection of pain, resilience, and hope. In the afternoon, she received a call from Richard. His voice was softer than before, a little warmer. "Selena, I would like to invite you to be Skylux's honorary advisor during the restructuring process. I believe no one understands human values better than you." Selena looked out the window, where the late afternoon sunlight fell on her desk. "I will help, but only if it means making a real difference," she replied. "I don't want to tell anyone how to live. I just want to remind them of the right things they've forgotten." Richard smiled over the phone. "That's why I need you." When the call ended, Selena sat for a long time. She opened her computer and wrote a letter to her staff, not about victory, but about perseverance. "We cannot change the world by anger alone, but we can change the way the world responds by calmness, compassion, and a belief that justice never goes out of fashion." Outside, the city lights came on. Selena stood up, stepped onto the balcony, and took a deep breath of the night air. She knew that, even though the Skylux story was over, The fight for justice continued in her work, in her life, and in every small decision she made every day. She smiled and said softly to herself, "Sometimes, maintaining dignity is the way to change a whole system." A plane flew across the sky, its red lights flashing. Selena watched it until it disappeared into the clouds. Peace returned to her heart, but with it came a newfound confidence. She didn't need to win anyone over. She just needed to keep doing what was right. 2 months after the Skylux incident, the world has moved on. Social media no longer talks about Seat 2A every day, but the story lives on in the hearts of those who witnessed it. Selena Harper returns to her daily routine at Right Tech Solutions, meetings, projects, and motivational talks. Life returns to normal, but she knows she has changed forever. One autumn morning, Selena sat reading the newspaper in a small cafe near her office. The front page was about the Skylux Diversity Program, a new employee training program and scholarship named after her, the Harper Fellowship for Equal Opportunity in Aviation. She smiled slightly, a sense of relief spreading through her. The door of the shop opened. A small bell rang. Selena looked up and saw a woman enter. Blonde hair, a slightly thinner figure, a hesitant expression on her face. She stopped when their eyes met. It was Emily Lawson. Selena didn't respond right away. Emily stood still for a moment, then walked back to her desk, her voice soft. "I'm not sure if you want to see me, but I need to do this." Selena gestured for him to sit down. "I'm listening." Emily sat down, her hands clasped together. The light from the window fell on her face, highlighting the exhaustion from the long day. "I lost my job, not just from Skylux. The media company I worked for also terminated my contract after the video went viral. I received thousands of messages, many of them harshly critical. I deserved it, but I also learned things I never understood before." Selena was silent, listening. Emily took a deep breath and continued, "I didn't come here to ask for forgiveness. I just wanted to say thank you, because through it, I saw that I actually lived in a world that I thought was fair, but was actually only fair to people like me." She looked up, her eyes sincere. "I started volunteering at a center that helped Black workers. I heard their stories, and I realized, in that moment, that I was the one who made people feel small. I didn't want to be that person anymore." Selena looked at Emily for a long time. There was no anger in her eyes, just the silence of someone who had experienced hurt and understood the value of forgiveness. She said slowly, "I don't want anyone to suffer because of that story. I just want people to realize that sometimes just a small action can make others lose their self-esteem. I don't hate you, Emily. I just hope you really change." Emily nodded, her eyes welling up. "I've changed, and I want to help. I contacted Skylux. I'm asking to be part of the reform program, not to restore my reputation, just to make amends." Selena smiled slightly. "If you really want to do it, I believe you will find a way." They sat in silence for a while. Outside, a gentle breeze blew through the golden-leafed trees. Sunlight streamed through the glass windows and onto the table, illuminating the 2 steaming cups of coffee. The 2 women, once on opposite sides, now sat together on a peaceful morning, no longer opponents, but 2 people learning to be better. After the meeting, Selena walked out into the street, feeling as if something had been lifted from her heart. Forgiveness doesn't change the past, but it heals the present. That afternoon, she received a text message from Richard Wallace. Selena, I have great news. Emily Lawson has been hired as a bias awareness trainer in Skylux's diversity program. She's really changed. Selena read the message and smiled slightly. She didn't reply right away, just looked out the window. The sun was setting, the light turning a soft orange, covering the city in a peaceful hue. That evening, she sat in her living room watching the television news. The image that appeared was Emily Lawson, standing before the camera, speaking at the training program launch ceremony. Her voice was trembling slightly, but sincere. I used to be someone who believed I could do no wrong, simply because I was powerful. But power blinded me. I thank the woman who taught me the most valuable lesson, that justice is not just a slogan, but an action. And sometimes, action begins with one person standing firm in his seat. Selena turned off the TV, her eyes stinging. She didn't need anyone to say her name. She just needed to know that her story had planted a new seed in the world. The next morning, when she arrived at the office, she received a small package. Inside was a Skylux plane ticket, first-class seat, number 2A. Under the ticket was a hastily written note: I saved this seat for you, not out of privilege, but out of respect. Emily. Selena looked at the ticket for a long time. Then she placed it on her desk, next to a framed photo of her mother, who had taught her that strength lies not in shouting, but in remaining silent and still being heard. She sighed in relief, her eyes softening. The circle finally closed, not with anger, but with forgiveness and genuine change. As the sun set, Selena stood by the office window and watched a Skylux plane take off and slowly ascend into the sky. She smiled slightly. Maybe justice can finally fly. 3 months after the Skylux incident, the world has not forgotten. Even as the newsfeed has scrolled through thousands of new topics, there are still articles, videos, and discussions that retell the story of Black CEO and Seat 2A. The story has become a staple in communications classes, corporate ethics training, and social justice talks. At Columbia University, a seminar called The Power of Silence was held. On the screen, Selena Harper sat calmly in first class. A lecturer said, "You don't have to shout to be heard. Sometimes, just standing still, holding your position, is enough to change the system." The room fell silent, then erupted into a long applause. Meanwhile, Skylux Airlines is undergoing a major restructuring. Richard Wallace has changed its management strategy. New employees are being trained extensively on diversity and respect for differences. The airline has launched a Skylux Voices program where all employees, regardless of rank, can share their stories. Selena Harper, though no longer directly involved, has been invited to serve as an honorary advisor. Every month, she attends internal virtual meetings, listening to the stories of young employees who once felt invisible. One afternoon, in a virtual conference room, a young Asian American flight attendant spoke, her voice trembling but determined. "I used to be afraid to speak up when I saw injustice. But thanks to your story, I understand that silence is no longer an option. Thank you, Ms. Harper." Selena smiled, her eyes softening. "Don't thank me," she simply replied. "Thank you for speaking up. Out there, the internet is still a place of sharing and arguing. Some people see Selena as a hero. Some people think she was too tough, causing others to lose their jobs. But to her, that doesn't matter anymore. She doesn't want to be a hero. She just wants to live up to what she believes." Late one night, returning home, Selena sat on the balcony, the city lights illuminating her face. Old jazz played softly in the air. She thought back to the early days after the incident, the criticism, the prejudiced comments, the advice to toughen up. It was all over. Now, she felt only peace. Her phone vibrated. It was from Ava Collins, her assistant. "Hey, there's a new article about you in the New Yorker today. They call you the woman who kept her silence so the world could speak." Selena read the message and chuckled. She didn't need the title. But she knew that, sometimes, the stories told and retold were how the world remembered the right things. A few days later, she received an invitation to speak at a global conference on equality and leadership. Hundreds of business leaders, journalists, and academics attended. When Selena stepped onto the stage, she wore a pure white suit. The lights shining on her face made her radiant, but not arrogant. She began with a soft, confiding voice. "I'm not here to tell my story. I'm here to remind everyone that anyone can be Selena Harper in their moment. Someone who dares to hold on to their dignity, even when the world around them is shaking." She paused, her eyes looking out at the audience. "I didn't win against anyone in that story. I just chose not to lose against myself." Applause rang out, spreading throughout the auditorium. Some stood up, some wiped away tears. In the back row, a blonde woman bowed her head and smiled. It was Emily Lawson. She had come quietly, unnoticed. When their eyes met, there was only a slight nod. No words were needed. The speech ended. Selena left the stage and walked down the hallway. A young reporter ran after her and asked quickly, "Ms. Harper, do you think your story changed the world?" Selena paused, smiling. No one can change the world with a single action, but every right action changes the world a little. She continued walking, her small figure followed by the light from the long hallway. The next day, her speech went viral online. Excerpts about the power of calm became a trending topic. Many users wrote, "I used to be afraid to speak up. Now I understand that sometimes standing your ground is the loudest voice." That evening, Selena sat in her office. She opened her laptop and watched the old video, the moment she sat in seat 2A. She looked at herself, calm in the midst of the power surge. The look in her eyes was different now. No more defense, just trust. She pressed pause, whispering as if concluding for herself. Justice is not a thunderclap. It is an echo of determination, carried over time. Outside, the city lights were still on. A Skylux plane streaked across the night sky, leaving a thin trail of light like a memory. Selena watched, eyes glistening, whispering, "Seat 2A, where it all began." She smiled, relieved. The story was no longer hers. It belonged to everyone who had been overlooked, who had been silenced, who had been tired of proving their worth, and now they knew if just one person stood still, the world would move. It was an early winter morning in New York. The sky was a soft gray, and the first flakes of snow were falling on the streets. Selena Harper walked out of the building where she had just finished speaking on humane leadership in the modern world. The talk lasted 2 hours, but to her it felt like only a few minutes. People stood up to applaud. Some came up to shake her hand. Others asked for pictures. She kept her small, calm smile, the way she had sat in seat 2A that day. Once outside, Selena looked up at the hazy sky, where small planes trailed white smoke. The wind whipped around her, and she wrapped her scarf around herself. Then walked slowly down the familiar street. Memories flooded her mind, the sound of the plane speakers. Emily's eyes, Richard's face at the shareholder meeting, Samantha's tears when she said she had changed the way she saw the world. Everything, all of it, for one moment, the moment she chose not to get up. She stopped at a small coffee shop. The owner recognized her and smiled. "Good morning, Ms. Harper. Latte as usual." She nodded and smiled. "Yes, thank you." Sitting by the window, Selena looked out at the street, where people were rushing about as usual. None of them knew that the woman sitting there silently had once made the world stop to watch her act. But to her, that no longer mattered. She didn't want to be remembered as an icon. She wanted to be remembered as someone who chose the right thing when no one else would. The phone vibrated. A new message from Emily Lawson. "Selena, I just finished my first training session for Skylux. Today, I told your story to the new flight attendants. Some of them cried. I thought you should know." Selena smiled. "I'm glad to know they cried because they understood, not because they were afraid." She replied. Outside. The snow began to fall harder. She took a deep breath, feeling the cold air on her skin, a feeling both sharp and refreshing. In that moment, she realized that what she was doing was not just changing an airline, but changing the conversation in society about fairness, dignity, and how people view each other. On the internet, a new post from Skylux has just been shared. Skylux Airlines is proud to announce that our humanitarian training program, inspired by the story of Selena Harper, has officially expanded to 12 countries. Our goal is to create fairer skies for all passengers. The post was flooded with thousands of comments, most of them encouraging and admiring, but there were also some harsh, opposing responses. Selena read through a few lines, then closed her phone. She knew that no change came easy. Progress was always accompanied by debate. The important thing was that it had begun. That evening, Selena returned home. Her small apartment was on the 32nd floor, overlooking the Hudson River. The city glowed in the distance, the buildings reflecting their lights like a strip of stars on the ground. She walked to the balcony, a cup of hot tea in her hand, and stared into the distance. On the table in the living room, a framed photo of her mother still sits there, the woman who worked as an airport cleaner for many years, who taught her that you don't have to shout louder than anyone else, just keep your voice steady enough so others can't ignore you. Selena touched the frame gently. "Mom, I get it. Justice doesn't have to be loud, it just has to be real and lasting." In that moment, she realized there are victories that are not awarded with trophies or titles, but with quiet changes in people's hearts. A week later, Selena was invited to attend the Voices of Change event in Washington, D.C. Many famous speakers, leaders, and journalists were present. When it was her turn to speak, she stepped onto the stage, her voice still warm, slow but powerful. "I don't want you to hear my story as a miracle. There are no miracles. There are only choices, and every day we are given the opportunity to choose to be silent or to speak up, to give way or to stand firm, to do what is easy or what is right." The audience was silent. Each sentence, each word fell as if soaking into everyone's mind. She looked out at the audience, her voice softer but warmer. Fairness is not a luxury. It begins with how we look at each other, not by skin color, not by status, but by character. One person in the audience stood up, followed by several others. The applause was loud and long. After the speech, a little black girl about 10 years old ran up, holding a small notebook. Miss Selena. I want to be like you when I grow up. Selena sat down, smiling. You don't have to be like me. You just have to be someone you're proud of. Okay. The girl nodded, her eyes shining. Selena placed her hand on her shoulder, her heart filled with emotions that no words could describe. That night, she returned to the hotel, opened the window, and looked up at the starry sky. She saw a Skylux plane flying by, its yellow lights flashing. In that moment, she smiled, not because of victory, but because of change. Selena whispered, "Finally, we learned to fly together." The sound of the wind mixed with the sound of the engine fading away, like the finale of a long journey. It was a spring morning. The sky was clear and sunny. Selena Harper was on a flight from New York to San Francisco. She chose Skylux Airlines. For the first time since everything had happened, she was returning to the airline that had made waves around the world. She stepped into first class. The flight attendant greeted her with a friendly smile, not a forced smile or a fake polite smile, a real smile, warm and natural. Selena smiled back, then looked around the cabin. Everything seemed different. The air was lighter, more cozy. In the middle row, she saw a small, delicately mounted plaque on the wall. Seat 2A, a symbol of dignity and change. Selena paused. She touched the shiny metal plate. An indescribable feeling washed over her. She hadn't asked for it, but the company had done it not to honor her, but to remind everyone that respect was a choice, not a privilege. The flight attendant walked over. It was a young African-American woman named Nia Robinson. She smiled. "Ms. Harper, it is my honor to serve you today. I joined Skylux because of your story." Selena looked at her, touched. "Thank you. Nia, thank you for choosing to be a part of the change." As the plane took off, Selena looked out the window. White clouds drifted lazily beneath the wings. The sound of the engines and the captain's soft voice through the loudspeakers created a soothing soundtrack. She closed her eyes and let herself be carried away by the atmosphere. Suddenly, a familiar voice came over the loudspeaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Emily Lawson. We welcome you to Skylux Airlines." Selena opened her eyes in surprise. Emily, the VIP passenger from the incident, was now the captain. She chuckled. Life was amazing. A moment later, when the plane had stabilized, Nia brought her a small card. In neat handwriting, Selena, "I took my first flight today. I couldn't help but think of you. Thank you for not hating me, even though I was wrong. I've learned that forgiveness is the only way to fly. Emily." Selena read it, then placed the card on the tray table in front of her. She looked out, still smiling. The clouds passed like memories, like traces of a long journey that was now finally over. The plane landed in San Francisco. As she stepped off the plane, airport staff greeted her warmly. A reporter recognized her and asked, "Ms. Harper, what do you think about Skylux Seat 2A becoming iconic?" Selena paused, looking straight into the camera. Symbols only matter when people make real change. Seat 2A wasn't my victory. It was a victory of compassion and awareness. That answer was immediately shared across social media, becoming that week's top inspirational quote. A few days later, Selena attended the graduation ceremony of a group of Harper Fellowship students. In the auditorium, she walked up to the stage and looked at the young faces full of hope. She spoke slowly, her voice echoing in the quiet space. "I used to think that justice came from the court or the law. But then I realized justice begins with the way we treat each other. A look, a small action, a right choice, that is the justice each person can create. As the ceremony ended, a young student approached and handed her a small painting. It showed a woman sitting in seat 2A, looking out the window at the blue sky and bright sunlight. Below it were the words, "She stayed," and the world moved. Selena held the picture, tears falling silently. That evening, she returned to the hotel by the bay. The red sunset reflected on the water. Small waves lapped against the shore. She stood there for a long time, letting the wind blow her hair, letting the salt air touch her lips, letting everything become so still. Ava Collins called. "Selena, I just wanted to let you know that your program was just selected by the United Nations Foundation as a model for humanitarian work. We did it." Selena laughed, her voice light as air. "No, Ava, we are doing it, and we will continue." She turned off the computer, then opened her notebook and wrote a few last lines. "Sometimes the greatest thing we can do is not to win, but to keep our heart intact in the midst of the storm, because when we stand firm in the wind, we will become the support for others to fly." She put down her pen and closed her eyes. Outside, the sun was setting, the sky turning a deep purple. A small plane flew by, leaving a long trail of light in the sky. Selena watched, saying softly to herself, "Seat 2A is more than just a seat. It is a place where humanity relearns how to treat each other." A breeze blew by, carrying the scent of sea salt. She felt relieved, as if her soul could finally fly. 3 years after the Skylux incident, Seat 2A became part of American aviation history. No longer a media incident, but a symbol of change. A documentary called Seat 2A When Silence Spoke was released online. In it, the people involved in the story recount the journey, each with their own perspective, each with their own voice, each with their own emotions. The screen opens with a familiar scene, Los Angeles International Airport, a mild morning sun. The camera pans slowly along the waiting area, stopping at the VIP area where it all began. The narrator's voice rings out, soft but powerful. No one knows that just one small seat can make the world look at how people treat each other. The scene cuts to Nia Robinson, now a regional supervisor. I remember the first day I met her, Selena Harper. She says, "I was just a new flight attendant." She smiled and said to me, "Your job isn't just to serve, it's to make people feel valued." That changed the way I do my job. The camera pans to Emily Lawson, now a Skylux captain. She sits in the cockpit, her hands on the controls, her voice low and thoughtful. Back then, I didn't understand what privilege was. I just thought I was protecting my rights. But then I looked back at the video. I saw a woman sitting there silently, but the look in her eyes made me feel ashamed. I lost my job, but I gained something more important, dignity. She paused, smiling slightly. I fly every day, and every time I pass 2A, I remember that lesson, not to atone for my sins, but to remind myself that power is only valuable when used to lift others up. The camera pans to Richard Wallace, now retired CEO of Skylux Airlines. He sits in his back garden, surrounded by trees and afternoon light. I used to think running an airline was about controlling everything. But that incident taught me that leadership isn't about controlling. It's about listening. When I fired 3 people, I wasn't happy, I was hurt, but I knew that real change starts with accountability. and Selena Harper made me face that. The next scene is Samantha Brooks, who filmed the viral video. She is now a television reporter. I didn't mean to do anything big. I just felt something was wrong. I filmed it just to preserve the evidence. But when that clip went viral, I realized that maybe, in this noisy era, justice sometimes begins with one person pressing the record button. The background music builds softly, and the images cut to various places: Harper Fellowship students, Skylux employees attending training, a black child smiling brightly as he looks up at the sky, holding a model airplane with the Skylux logo printed on it. The narrator continued 3 years on. The world still talks about Seat 2A, not as an event, but as a reminder that respect doesn't have to be given, it has to be earned. The camera pans back to Selena Harper. She's retired from direct management now, but she speaks regularly at schools. She's speaking to a group of students at Stanford University. The board reads, "Leadership is humanity in motion." Many people ask me if I regret that the story cost people their jobs and caused the world to argue. She said, "I say no, because sometimes the truth is uncomfortable. But if you are afraid of the truth, you will live in silence forever." A student asked, "What kept you from getting angry that day?" Selena smiled and replied, "I saw my mother being looked down upon by others just because she was wearing a janitor's uniform. I promised myself that if I ever got to sit in a different chair, I would not leave it until others saw my dignity." The statement silenced the room. Some students bowed their heads, a few wiped away tears. The final scene of the film shows Selena standing on the balcony of her New York home, looking up at the sky. In her hand is an old painting with the words, "She stayed," and the world moved. The narrator's voice spoke one last time. Sometimes the world is not changed by noisy revolutions, but by one person standing firm. Because when one person stands still in the truth, the whole world must move. The screen went black. White text appeared dedicated to everyone who ever felt unseen. The movie ended, but people stayed. In many homes, cafes, and offices, people watched and discussed. Some cried, some smiled, some texted their friends. Have you seen Seat 2A? That story made me think differently about how I treat others. Elsewhere, on Skylux Flight 742, Nia Robinson walked to Seat 2A. She placed a small, handwritten card on the table. If you're sitting here today, know that you are at the beginning of a change. Thank you for choosing Skylux. The passengers read, smiling. They looked up at the windows. The sky outside was a brilliant blue, the sun shining through the clouds. A sense of peace pervaded them, as if, even though they did not know the story, they felt something was right. And in New York, Selena Harper received a video message. It was from Emily Lawson, sent from the cockpit. "Selena, I flew over the Atlantic today. I thought you might want to see this." The camera panned out the window. The sun was rising, a golden light spreading across a sea of clouds. Emily continued, "Fairness isn't about the destination. It's about the journey, and we're still flying." Selena smiled. She turned off her phone and looked up. The sky outside her window was bright. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and said softly, "Yes, we are." A quiet morning in New York. The sun was rising slowly over the horizon, its golden light filtering through the glass buildings. Selena Harper sat at her desk, a cup of coffee in her hand, looking out at the people below. The sounds of the city waking up echoed in the distance: cars, horns, and footsteps harmonizing into a lively soundtrack. 3 years had passed since the day she sat in seat 2A. Everything seemed to have passed like a dream, but also so clearly as if it had just happened yesterday. Selena turned on her computer. The emails, thank you notes, and speaking invitations continued to arrive every day. Some were from people she'd never met: teachers, waitstaff, students, single mothers. They all said the same thing. Your story makes me dare to stand up or dare to stay. She read each line, smiled, then gently placed her hand on her chest. In her heart, there was no longer any pride of victory, only gratitude for having had the opportunity to contribute a small part to the awakening of the world. On the bookshelf next to her desk, a small object stood out among the piles of documents, a metal plaque engraved with the words Seat 2A, a symbol of dignity and change. Skylux had given it to her to celebrate the 3rd anniversary of the Voices of Change program. She had never hung it on the wall, just left it there, a humble reminder that all great things start with small choices. That afternoon, Selena left the office to attend a special event. An international conference on social justice and humane leadership was being held in Chicago. When she entered the large auditorium, the audience rose to their feet. The applause was not loud, but steady, warm, like the heartbeat of a community of understanding. On stage, the host introduced her Selena Harper, the woman who made the world listen with her silence. She stepped forward, smiling. Her voice was soft but powerful. I don't know if I really changed the world, but I do know that I did, and sometimes that's the most important thing you can do. She paused, looking around the room. Equity is not a fixed destination. It is a long, sometimes tiring, sometimes painful journey. But every step we take in the right direction, however small, is part of human progress. The room was dead silent. Some bowed their heads, some shed tears. What I remember most is not the moment I was asked to leave my seat, but the moment I decided to stay. She continued. I didn't stay to prove anything. I stayed to remind myself that I was worthy, and neither should anyone in this room. No one has the right to make you feel less than you are. The applause was thunderous, but Selena stood there, calm, not smiling too much, only her eyes shining brighter. After the talk, a middle-aged man came up and introduced himself as a sociology professor. He said, "You know, we are researching the Seat 2A effect. It has become a new concept in social psychology, which means that one calm but determined individual can create a chain reaction of changes in public perception." Selena laughs. I don't think of myself as an effect. I'm just a person. But if my actions make someone see the world differently, then maybe. That's the real purpose of existence. That evening, she took a walk along the shore of Lake Michigan. The wind was cool. The waves were gentle. The city lights were reflected on the water. She pulled out her phone and pulled up an old video, a clip of Emily Lawson speaking at a Skylux training session. Justice is not an apology. It is a commitment to action. Selena chuckled softly, then put away her phone. She raised her head and looked up at the night sky. A plane flew by, its red lights flashing. In her heart, there was no longer any anger, only peace, and a simple belief that people could improve. The next day, she wrote a short post on her personal page. When I sat in seat 2A, I didn't know the world was watching. I only knew that I couldn't lose my dignity. Each of us has our own Seat 2A, the place where life asks us, are you willing to stay to protect what is right? If you are, even for a moment, you will have changed the world. The post was shared millions of times. Newspapers, TV stations, and podcasts echoed the message. But for Selena, what mattered most wasn't the number, but the letter she received a few days later from an older woman. I used to be a flight attendant. I used to stay silent when I saw injustice. Today, I teach my daughter that if someone asks her to leave her seat, she can say, "No, thank you." Selena Harper. She finished reading and smiled softly. Her eyes showed a mixture of warmth, sadness, and pride. Late at night, she turned off the lights and opened the window. The city was quiet. The night sky was full of stars. Selena leaned against the window frame and whispered, "Seat 2A is more than just a seat. It is a reminder that justice begins with how we look at each other with human eyes." And somewhere out there, in the vast night sky, a plane flies by, its long white streak painting the sky. Maybe it's a Skylux, maybe it's not. But Selena knows whatever the flight, the journey of justice continues, day by day, person by person, choice by choice. The story of Black CEO removed from VIP seat is not just about a chair, but about human dignity. It reminds us that justice doesn't start in the courts or with grand slogans. It starts with how we treat each other in the smallest moments. Selena Harper chose to stay. She didn't scream. She didn't fight back with anger. She kept her silence, but her silence was louder than any voice. Because when we maintain dignity in the midst of adversity, we not only protect ourselves, we light the way for others. The message for each of us, especially those who have experienced many upheavals in life: live calmly, but do not bow down. Be kind, but do not compromise with injustice, because sometimes just one small action of yours is enough to change the heart of the whole world. The story ends, but the journey of justice continues in every look, every decision, every time we choose what's right over what's easy. Thank you for listening until the end. If you believe this story deserves to be shared, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel to continue telling humane journeys where people are seen, respected, and loved.